Financial wellness. Reach out to them for advice at 855-DON-GINO. And now back to your hosts, Don Getling and Gino Franti.
And thank you for joining us again on the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show this Saturday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. every Saturday morning. And you can find out more at donandgino.com. We broadcast to you straight from the Vault Media Studios right here at Skyline Home Loans, where we help you with your dream of home ownership. And we do that every single week now. For 5 years we've been doing the show. And today Don's not with me. I have another co-host, one of my favorite co-hosts actually, is Mr. Rob Schwartz. How you doing, Rob?
I am outstanding, Gino. Again, thank you for having me on. And I'd like to say, just for the record, there may be other step-in guests for Don Getling, but I believe I still hold the title of most visits. So in the world of, I'm going to stake my claim to it, that I have reached Joan Rivers status if you are, in fact, Ed McMahon, and he is Johnny Carson.
Okay. Well, let's see. I don't know. I think Steve Korn is mano a mano with you on guest appearances. So we'll have to go back in the record books. In fact, speaking of going back to the record books, the best way to look at 5 years worth of our catalog of shows, which you may want to do because we've had some of the best professionals on over the last 5 years, is go to donandgino.com. Every single one of the shows is broken out there. You could search by subject matter. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is that we can watch the progression of the economy through the topics of our show. And I think I called it From Distress to Success. And you could see that when we started our show, we had to rebuild the real estate market. It was a disaster. The economy was in shambles. We were talking about, things. These words have not been in our vernacular lately, but I'm not talking about loan modifications too often. I'm not talking about bankruptcies every day. I'm not talking about short sales. I'm not talking about debt settlement and debt negotiations. A little bit, don't get me wrong, a little bit, but not like it was. It was predominant in the entire show, was almost all about distress.
And I remember that very, very well. I remember how tumultuous it was. I myself just completed a bankruptcy not too long ago, and my financial futures look much more promising than they did 5 years ago. And certainly if we're looking at the data that we're going to discuss today, Gino, that data is very compelling to make the very, very same claim.
You know what's interesting about that, Rob, and I think I find myself, I talked to somebody last week, and even I'm having mixed emotions over the economy. I feel like, we can't raise rates yet because the economy's not good enough. And then I see 3 or 4 more reports, and I'm like, well, maybe it is. Maybe actually employment's pretty good and housing looks pretty good. Well, maybe those are good indicators that we're going to be okay. But then I still hear a little bit of fear out there. People are saying, oh, we're just building another bubble. None of this is real. This is all fake. And it's like, well, even if it was created via artificial means, is it really fake or is it our new reality?
Well, the bottom line is the bottom line, and very rarely do numbers lie. And when we start to look at some of these values, and starting with the industry that you know so well, the home market, the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, which covers the entire nation, rose 5.2% in the last 12 months. And if we look at that, that's a pretty darn good indicator that in major metropolitan markets, the housing market is doing just fine, which also has to tell us that people have to afford those homes.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we're concerned about, right, is we've seen so much appreciation. And, I hear them all, right? Oh, there's another bubble coming. Oh, it's going to crash. Oh, when rates rise, you will never be able to afford it. Affordability is at the max. Now, so if I really look at it objectively, and I forget that I'm in the housing market, and I look at all these pieces of data, what I'm seeing is that, yes, certain areas have appreciated very quickly, and those areas that have appreciated very quickly are going to stagnate. They're going to stop. They just can't continue to rise at the rates that they've been rising. But with the lack of inventory that we have, it's been very difficult to say that prices can't continue to rise. And when you look at the projects, let's go to Santa Clarita for a second. Let's not be in the whole nation. When you look at like the Newhall Land and Farm project, that they've been trying to start here now for well over a decade, probably about a 20-year project now. And there's a fish, some little tiny fish egg or something, a sickle something. If somebody really knows what that's all about, you can call me and let me know. But the reality is there's environmental things that are also holding back these large builders. And that's another reason why we don't have so many projects coming online, is because it's becoming more difficult to build. And so the new home prices are going to be so much more expensive relative to what there was before, builders aren't willing to take the risk because they're not sure there's a bottom line there for them.
So it's a very simple issue of supply and demand. When we have a small supply, and we've had a small supply, and we don't see any change in that supply in any significant way, yet we have an increase in wages, which we have in fact seen, we start to see why people are willing to pay. And while there is a short value in the market, which is going to continue to drive prices, at least in the short term, and that's coming from someone who's not an economist. I mean, that's the data is staring me right in the face. I mean, I assume you agree?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the reality is, like I said, we got to remember, real estate is ultra local. And I think that's something that people forget. So we're looking at the Case-Shiller number, and we're looking at the 20-city index at 5.4%. That's a great number, but if we look at areas like Los Angeles, okay, Los Angeles last year was 8.4 or 8.6%. I can't remember the exact number. That's a large number for the home prices that we have here in Los Angeles. Right, the average home price in Los Angeles is well into the 400s. So having an 8% gain is very, very steep. And here in Santa Clarita, we've seen gains much steeper than that. Granted, when we saw the fall, we saw them much bigger than that. And now I think we're leveling out with the rest of the country where, maybe we'll see 5 or 6% gains. I don't think that Santa Clarita is poised to see 8 or 10% this year.
No, and like the other hot markets, they've all been in the West Coast. It's been places like Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Denver, Colorado, all double-digit gains over the last year. So we would expect those markets, at least in the near term, to continue growth, but maybe not as quick a pace.
Yeah, what's interesting, right, is I think California, what do they say, as California does the rest of the country, right? And so when you look at California, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we had double-digit gains. So now, as those areas with double-digit gains are leveling off, right? Especially you look at San Francisco. San Francisco, just a few weeks ago, had their first indicator of a decline in prices.
Wow, no kidding.
Okay, so that's, some people are saying, that's it. That's it. The whole thing's going to go to, it's going to go to the hell. And it's really not, because the reality is the prices in San Francisco are ridiculous. There is the word affordability doesn't exist in San Francisco.
It is absolutely the most expensive market. I don't care, just housing or just living in general. It is the most expensive market in America today.
Unbelievable. And, it doesn't mean that San Francisco is a bad place. It means it's a great place, and that's why people want to live there, right?
Absolutely.
So you're back to supply and demand. We're not creating the supply fast enough for the demand that we have, at least here in California. Now, here, I'm going to use my crystal ball that's sitting here on the table that Don and I have used so well over the last few years. Texas, be careful. There's sticks and bricks on the side of the road everywhere in Texas. They are just building. And granted, they've had a huge influx of population. Mostly people leaving California because of affordability.
Indeed.
But the reality is it sustainable? Are they overbuilding in Texas? So those are things that will impact the rest of the nation, but that's why real estate is ultra local.
Well, I'm a person who believes in numbers, and I'm a person who believes in don't take my word for it. So one thing that I just came across, U.S. new home sales posted their strongest month in more than 8 years, with a 16.5% jump from just 1 month earlier.
So that's a great number, obviously. That's a staggering number, right? So the problem with watching new home sales stats is you really got to look at a longer period of time because you have projects coming online, inventory coming online. So I wish we had a chart to overlay new home inventory over new home sales, and I think you'd find that we're pretty much swallowing anything that gets built. I know here in Santa Clarita, anything that gets built gets sold. There's no price reductions. I haven't seen any price reductions. I really haven't seen a lot of incentives, and I haven't seen much of anything necessary. If you build it, they will come right now.
I can tell you in my community, I do live in Valencia, and just my neighbors alone, we've seen 3 or 4 properties go on the market in the last, say, 30 days. None of them have lasted more than 3 days.
Yeah, it's unbelievable right now. Santa Clarita is super, super hot, and anything you put on the market sells as long as it looks nice, as long as it's well cared for, and as long as it's priced right. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about bubble talk. Because I do hear some bubble rumors, on the ground. We shared all this great information, and so everything's great. Are we heading back for the same thing that we did in 2007? Are we at the end of a 10-year cycle? So when we get back to the Don and Gino Real Estate and Finance Show, we'll discuss if we're in another bubble.